You bring up something really important, and that's learning to trust your intuition. Unfortunately, I think most of us do have to learn to trust it. What are some of the things you can do to go about learning to trust your intuition?
I think the biggest thing is just starting to sit with yourself in silence and letting yourself be bored and letting yourself see where your imagination and even just say, call forth your intuition, like ask it to come forth and kind of just see what happens. Because when we're on the go and we're just busy, 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 that's what cuts it off. Is all of a sudden you're like, well, I don't want to sit by myself. That's scary. Or I'm just going to turn on the TV, or I'm going to do this because I don't want to be with myself. So it's almost kind of like starting to date yourself again.
Michelle DeKeyser woke up one day and asked herself, "Is this all there is?" And the answer was no. She wanted more. That inkling of desire sent her on a midlife quest to find her true calling. And that calling was to reach out to other moms in similar circumstances. Michelle started an online community, podcast, and events called Connecting Mamas, which helps mompreneurs connect through authenticity and community. This is a story about having the courage to step outside your comfort zone and create something uniquely yours, then giving back. Please welcome Michelle DeKeyser to Bump in the Road. Michelle, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
I'm so excited to be here, Pat. Thanks for having me. The bump in the road, I think, came for me, especially for some, the idea of COVID, right? When everything, I feel like a lot of people went one of two ways. They either really went inwards and learned something from it, or they sat and complained and festered about it, in my opinion. So it was 2020 and it was September, and I was just having that moment in my life where it's like, all I am is a mom. And I feel like this listless feeling of like, is there more to this? And my father and brother-in-law both had cancer at the moment. So we had decided to homeschool the kids just because we didn't know what COVID meant or any of that. So on September 1st of 2020, I decided to homeschool the kids, as well as start a program called the 75 Hard on the exact same day. I don't know if people who are familiar with the 75 Hard or not, but it's very regiment, where you have to do this checkoff list every single day. So it's 2 workouts. One has to be outside, 45 minutes. You're drinking a gallon of water. You're sticking to your diet, like all these things. You're even taking a picture. All these things that you're doing. And if you don't do any of them, you're supposed to start back at day 1.
Oh, gosh.
So think about 75 days in a row, because you're thinking about it. And so there were days where I wasn't feeling well. Plus I was homeschooling the kids, and I would actually take them on some of our like nature walks, and like they were tired. Like, I'm still going to get to my 45 minutes. You guys can join me. Or they'd play at the park and I just keep walking around them to get to my 45 minutes of doing something outdoors when they didn't want to join me. And so it was just working that into my day of doing all of these things as well. And I can even remember one time where I was just like, I had the worst headache all day, and I was like on the couch. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to get up. I'm going to get the yoga done so I can check it off. So needless to say, I did finish the 75 days. And then I realized that there was actually 3 more phases to it. So there's phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, which are 30 days long each. But phase 1 starts to introduce 5-minute cold showers.
I'm not sure I'd make it through that.
And there's also part of it was 10 pages of nonfiction, so that you're learning something. And so then this comes into more visualization and things like that. And so there's different things. And phase 3 even ends with talking to a stranger every day and learning, and also doing random act of kindness. So it's kind of had my kids involved in a little bit of that, but it still was kind of towards the middle of COVID, or maybe a little bit to end. So like talking to a stranger was kind of hard in that time frame. That I can even remember going with my husband to the grocery store one night, and he's just like, okay, well, it's like 9:00 at night. Are you gonna actually talk to a stranger today or not?
Like, I can remember walking down Canyon Road in Santa Fe, and people would get off the sidewalk and walk to the other side of the road rather than walk near you.
Then talk to it. So I ended up talking to a cashier that night. I'm like, and we actually had a nice conversation, but it was getting out of your comfort zone and doing those things. But I came to day 3 or day 25 of that last phase. And I must have fallen asleep reading. And you're supposed to do all these things before you fall asleep. And so I woke up at 2:30 in the morning. I hadn't taken my picture. I had talked to a stranger that day. I'd done my random act of kindness. I'd done everything but taking that picture. It was funny because in the warning of the first podcast, when I was listening to it, they're like, the picture is the one that always going to get you. Just take it first thing in the morning and get it done. And I usually did. For some reason, I hadn't done that night. So I have this really strange picture of me at 2:30 in the morning. And I almost gave up. And then I had some friends who were like, just finish out your 5 days. So whether it's gray area or what, I ended up finishing out the 5 days. But what I finally realized in that process of doing it with the kid, them watching me do all this stuff and trying to figure out what was even the purpose of any of this, I finally understood the phrase, it's about the journey. Because when it came to that last 5 days, I was so dead set on this goal, this end point. But at that point, those 5 days didn't really matter because what I'd already done was I'd actually lost 45 pounds.
Oh my God.
I had more energy. I was doing all these things. My eating habits had completely changed. I mean, my friend had kept warning me about all the creamer I'd put in my coffee. I'd gotten down to coconut milk, just coconut milk with my coffee, like things that I'd been meaning to do that I'd never done. And so regardless of whether I say I finished this live hard year, which, it was just that picture the one night and I did take it at 2:30 in the morning, but so it's a gray area for some people who are like regiment on things, but it really was about looking back at the things that you have done. And so things started to shift in that point. And it was actually at the end of that year, I thought we were going to continue homeschooling the kids, and that turned into a whole another story. Excuse me. That I ended up, we ended up sending them back to school. And in that midst, I all of a sudden decided that I wanted to start a business. Somewhere along the idea when I was in my 30s, I was like 30s for me was about raising kids. And all of a sudden I was like in my 40s, I don't know why, but somehow I want it to be me with some sort of career or something. I didn't know what that looked like. But I signed up for my first big coaching business program, which my husband was dead set against. He was just more dead set against me not doing more research on the program that I chose and me trying to go with my intuition. And I'm like, in 6 months, I'm going to have this great big business. And well, he just 6 months later, he's like, see, I told you so. And so for me, the story now has been that process of figuring that part out in motherhood. And so as we're recording this on this day, I actually have a meeting set up later today for mompreneurs, and really spent this last month honing in. I had all these different ideas of how to run the business and what was doing. But then when you look back in hindsight of what was actually happening, I was in all these business groups or networking or things I was doing. I was always wondering, who are the women who speak to moms? And then looking at the idea of motherhood and creating something in this world. And all of a sudden, I had these dual messagings, because my goal was to create this, what you call the Mama Genius Hub. And it was a network for moms to figure out what they need in small bite-sized ways. And so I was collecting the speakers who could create these mini courses that we're putting in here. So then I had a messaging to the speakers who I want to be there. And then I had general messaging to the moms as members of this hub. And it was just causing like this confusion in my head. And so of 2025, January 2025, I kind of had these ideas when I came back from Christmas vacation. I was going to just hit the ground running, beginning of the year, all those motivations, all those goals you have in mind, like, let's just get it started. Right. But I came back and I was like, I just need to take some space and figure out, what does this all mean? What have I been creating? And I came to the realization that what I was doing was really creating an atmosphere for mompreneurs, moms who had this vision to create something in this world, whatever that was, or wanting to give back. But there's this chaos of motherhood with that, because it's almost this whole new isolation thing of doing, a lot of them were doing this digitally. And now we've kind of isolated ourselves into creating this business and still doing the momhood, so that we're losing that connection as we're trying to create all these things and losing some of that creativity. So this is geared towards bringing that all together, so all of us can reach into our creativity and do business in more of a feminine way. Because that was one of the things I was realizing in all these business classes. You have some female leaders, but a lot of them end up being men who end up running a lot of the show. And I just feel like they do things differently, and it's worded differently. Even if you're doing organization or you're doing something, it's worded differently when a woman says it versus a man. And sometimes our brains, especially as we're unsure as moms or as women getting into business, it's that unsure feeling. And sometimes hearing it from another woman and how they're doing it, it's just slightly different. And I always look back, this one story always sticks in my head, Sarah Blakely, the owner of Spanx. I love her to death. And just how she's done things, how she grew Spanx from $5,000. But what I love is she talks about the 80s when she was growing on this. And she was like, I was in a mastermind. And at the time, it was mostly men in business. So I'm in a mastermind with men. And she's like, and they had their big business plans and, all their ROI and like all their wording, all of that stuff with these business goals, right? She's like, yeah, well, I'm talking to the universe. I'm listening to my intuition. I'm following this. I'm running and doing this and all these things. And all of a sudden she starts making more money than them. And then they're like, what are you doing? And I think as women, a lot of times we take away from what we have to offer in a different capacity. Not that it's good or bad, but it's that we have to embrace that a little bit more. And I've struggled with that so much. And I have my husband over here saying, yes, you need the business plan. And I know I need the business plan in those terms, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the way a masculine business plan would be written. Like we still need the goals, we still need the organization, but there's always a little bit of different twists. And what I've realized with women is we do better when we create together. Like we were the gatherers. We were never meant to go out and hunt by ourselves or do any of those things. We co-create together. And that's actually the name of the meeting today is Mompreneurs co-create together, because it's all about us. I don't even know what it quite looks like yet, but it's about us coming together to create that image and that picture. And the feminine energy is all about the imagery, which I was Dale Allen was in her she wrote In the Right Mind, and I was part of her she was airing her movie and stuff, and I was helping with that. But what I loved about that, what I never thought about, is when the written word came to be. We think about all the books and stuff when they first started, there was no imagery in it. It was just words. And that's kind of when the masculine kind of took over a little bit, because everything was disseminated that way. Imagery's come back with the internet a little bit, but we've still got these devices, very masculine. But the more we think in images and pictures, the more we bring the feminine back into it. And I just never thought about that split of when books were published. And you think about those first books and the lack of imagery and all of that. And that was kind of like taking the feminine away from some of that. So as we start to visualize more, because I mean, a lot of times it's hard to visualize, what do you want amazing to look like in 12 months from now? And you're like, I don't know.
I just posted a piece on Substack about that, because every year I do a vision board. And I usually achieve my vision board about halfway through the year. Now, maybe I'm not aiming high enough, but that works for me. Because then I revamp it and add some other things and, move along again. But I find I'm very visual. I find that imagery and the idea of setting an almost intuitive goal is so much more powerful than the usual standard business plan.
Yeah. And for women, it might be just a matter of putting the image with words that go with it, but having that focal point. And so I'm working toward that too. And it's funny because I haven't finished my vision board for the year. I have started. And there was this one day my kids had off from school, and I had kind of worked up that we would kind of work on it together. And I was trying to do it in their terms. So I was like, let's open up Canva. Let's do a digital board this year, but let's, still put the images in there. And they were a lot more excited by that aspect, rather than getting all the magazines and cutting out or stuff, but they were able. And my daughter, my youngest, has it on her bulletin board, and every once in a while at night will be like, well, what, tell me a little bit about your vision board and how that worked today or what. My middle daughter, she's like, no, Mom, not doing it. No. But she had wanted to cut her hair and donate her hair. She had really long hair and she decided she wanted to chop it off. So I was like, a friend had shown me, she did a bingo vision board where she was able to put different things. And so if she created a bingo or something, then you can get rewarded for that. So I proposed that offer to her. So she at least attempted to start that. And she started putting images all over the bingo board. I'm like, your first image can be you you donating your hair, like,
Mhm.
some of the things you see for that. And so that worked for her. So it was my son, but my son went along with, it was my youngest, my son and I that started doing it, but I was so busy helping them that I've never got back to finishing mine, but it's in the works. It's still there visually, and trying to add images to it. But I think the more as women, or in general, men really bring back that feminine, that creative energy, it really is through the imagery and creating those pictures in our minds that we've turned into a lot of words and goals and ideas. But when we add those images, we add the feelings behind it, which brings forth the subconscious to really impact and make them happen.
Absolutely, and I think that, it really brings up the idea of left brain, right brain living. We live in a very left brain society. It's hierarchical, it's linear, it's a business plan.
Yeah.
And yet I would argue that real life happens in the right brain side, where you come up with these disjointed connections that theoretically would make no sense, but are so powerful and open new doors and get you out of your comfort zone to create new things.
Oh,
And
I totally agree.
I think, we've lost a lot in not emphasizing that right brain, intuitive, very human aspect in our journeys.
I agree so much. And that's why, I mean, Dale Allen was doing the whole history in the feminine, and her book is In Our Right Mind. So that how to get more into the right mind. And a lot of it, think about it also, is also with getting into your body and the
Mhm.
movement of it. Because we're so up here in our heads mentally with all the masculine and how to do all the things, but it really is taking those breaks and dance movements, or just getting back into your body, the breath and everything, to really ground you back in, to bring forth that creativity, because we get so focused on the doing that we lose sight of all the creativity. And I know that's what was happening to me when I mean, the original story that I told in the beginning of the podcast that's how I was feeling. I was feeling like there's something inside of me that wants to come out, but I don't know what that is. I don't know. And I mean, we're still working through the journey of it all, but it is really figuring out how to answer that calling from when you, and I have to say it, I feel like it happens to a lot of us. I don't know if we call it, I don't want to call it our midlife crisis, because I don't like those words at all, but that awakening inside females in their 40s and 50s, as either that they have kids and the kids are starting to merge, but it's
Mhm.
almost like that end of the Disney movie where they get married and that's the happily ever after. But then the now what? The now what is, I feel like, the awakening, when we decide what is our purpose. We have done we've checked off all the boxes, the college, the society, or whatever we thought would be, and all of a sudden we're
Yeah.
in the space, and then it's a now what? What happens after the Disney happily ever after, and what do we do with that? And I think that's where the loss, where I felt, was feeling that feeling, and a lot others might be feeling that as well. And as women, as we start to tap into that and find the women who are awakening with us, it becomes so much more powerful, because we are the gatherers. We were always meant to do things together, not by ourselves. But the masculine calls for us to do it individually and do it perfectly, which is
I
another issue.
Yeah, I think perfectionism is greatly overrated. But, I think it's almost a natural evolution somewhere around midlife for women. You've taken care of everybody around you. You've raised your kids, or your kids are old enough now, they're, fairly self-sufficient. What about you? It's finally your turn. And you're also dealing with a society that rewards youth over wisdom. And you hit 50, which is young, and yet you're invisible in so many ways, and that continues. Now, I think that invisibility can be an enormous strength, actually, but you're going through all this change, and now this change demands that you step outside your comfort zone. That's hard
Mm.
to do, and it's hard to do in the structure of a family where you have all these set roles and relationships. I really applaud you for diving into that program. I can't imagine what an upset that was to your life.
Well, I think it wasn't even necessarily the program itself. It was the choice of the program, and
Yeah.
not doing more research, because again, back to masculine, let's do all the research, how the pros and cons and charts, and then you can make a decision. But don't go with your intuition, because that. And it was funny. It was actually, I forgot who even said it. I was in another training recently, and they were just, it was a man who actually said it, and it's a famous man, and I can't even think. Oh, the owner of Priceline.
Okay.
He was in our training, and he was just like, he got asked the question, why are you going to this conference? He's like, I don't know. I feel like I need to, and I'll tell you about it when I get back. Now, I've tried to say that to my husband, but he's like, well, who do you want to meet? What are your goals? How many people are going to meet? I'm like, I just felt called to go to this training. Like, I don't have a specific like goal or reason. And sometimes I feel like we put these things in ourselves that's not good enough. And then that closes off our intuition, because that is our intuition guiding us to go to this. And one of those that I went to was actually 2 summers ago. I went to the World Parliament of Religions because it was right down the street in Chicago for me. So it was only an hour away. And the reason I went was because one of was learning how to do women's circles, and one of my heroes was Dr. Shinoda Bolen, and I had magically looked at her website a month before the conference, had no idea it was even going to exist, but she was going to be there, and so I just felt called to go. I didn't know, I wasn't necessarily looking at the agenda or all these things of why. I was just like, I feel called to go, and I ended up that they had the second floor was all about women empowerment and just the amount of circle knowledge I didn't even know existed. And the people that I met who run circles, who teach us how to speak in that manner and how to run these. And they had a red tent room. And I think a few of them might even be coming to my meeting later today from that. But it was the power of this women's floor of just us all coming together. And Daylon was actually doing a documentary of it, which I don't know if it got squashed or what, but she was there interviewing all the women on the floor of what are their passions, what are they doing, and the power that was coming from these conversations and coming together. I would never have been able to predict that or have any idea from the schedule that was going to occur. None.
Male energy and female energy are very different. I think on the male energy side, if you put enough testosterone in the room, they'll come up with a contest to be able to rank everybody. There
you go. Yes.
If you go to a group of women and put enough estrogen in the room, you're going to find this massive collaboration. And it's going to take off in all sorts of different areas, different shoots. Some will work, some won't. It's much less judgmental. And it's much more inquisitive and curious, I think.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think we need more of it. And I think, and I don't like to say that, not to bring men in yet, but I feel like women need that space to start this conversation and to, it's almost like infancy, right? Because it's this little flame. And I feel like if we don't foster it, like where it's big enough to feel like you can share it, then it's just going to get squashed.
And I think women, particularly moms, need that kind of collaboration and that framework and that, little boost to make these what are radical changes in their lives and their families' lives.
I agree completely, because I think that's the whole concept is like, we want to stay home. A lot of us want to stay home, but it may not be financially feasible. But at the same time, sending your kid off to daycare might not be the choice you want to make. So how do we make these businesses and these things that really thrive? And honestly, the biggest thing I'm seeing is big creating these visions, but then you have this vision, and if you don't have the support to make it happen or the support to run the ideas of the visions through someone who's going to be receptive, it's just going to get squashed. And Jamie, I think yeah. And I love how Jamie Kern-Lehman, her Worthy book, says, you're crazy until. And as soon as your idea has made it or create that company or made the money, then everyone wants to know how you did it, why you did it. But that first part of that crazy part, if you can't get through it or have the support of the people who will help you get to the until, you'll never make the until.
And it takes perseverance. You have to have a goal, an intuitive goal, I think, that aligns with your gut, that you truly believe in. And you have to be willing to go through the ups and downs in moving in that direction. And it can be very hard.
Yes, very hard. And there's the days where you're like, oh, I'm on top of the world. And all of a sudden you're like, the next year, like curled up in your bed because you're like, what did I just do? And it's really coming through that imposter syndrome and the things that have been blocked in you because you were squashed as a kid in certain aspects when your intuition was coming forth. And it's again, trusting your intuition again, because at some point we might have blocked that off or learning from it, but it's really coming back to it. And I just love to say, like, the whole goal is to be that role model for your kids. Because if you're not living in your true self or your genius, the same cycle is going to continue, because we all say, oh, well, as soon as you become a mom, you stop your dreams and it's for your kids. Well, then what kids are ever going to make their dreams happen? Because eventually they're going to become moms before their dreams might have all come true. And so it's a matter of trying to do it in motherhood, which changes everything about you. And so I always feel like those first couple of years when you're first figuring out is that survival mode. And you don't necessarily, unless you got the support right away, or you don't even know what hit you. But then all of a sudden you're like, you get these little pockets of time, which I call mom time, which are 15 minutes, right? All of a sudden they're playing for a little bit, but you never really have more than 15 minutes because a fight breaks out or someone needs your help or something, but you get these little pockets. And so that's where I want to come in is how do I fill these pockets? Because so much brain work to think about what to do with that time. They appear randomly. If you don't have a plan for it, then they disappear quickly. But when we plan out for just these small pockets, how to utilize them well, that's when we start growing more and start figuring these things out. And again, it's about being honest and vulnerable with your kids in how you share that, because when we try to be in that perfection mode and say, oh, do as I say, not as I do, all they see is what you do.
Yeah.
They don't care what comes out of your mouth if it doesn't match what you're doing.
That
They
is
could
so
care less.
true. No, and they're much smarter than you think and much more emotionally attuned than you think. You bring up something really important, and that's learning to trust your intuition. Unfortunately, I think most of us do have to learn to trust it. What are some of the things you can do to go about learning to trust your intuition?
I think the biggest thing is just starting to sit with yourself in silence and letting yourself be bored and letting yourself see where your imagination and even just say, call forth your intuition, like ask it to come forth. And kind of just see what happens, because when we're on the go and we're just busy, 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 that's what cuts it off. Is all of a sudden you're like, well, I don't want to sit by myself. That's scary, or I'm just going to turn on the TV, or I'm going to do this because I don't want to be with myself. So it's almost kind of like starting to date yourself again and just sit there with yourself and see where it takes you. Because it might be journaling. It might be meditation. It might be, there's so many different roads that you can take to get to your intuition, but they have to fit right with you. Because some people love to journal. Some people hate it. Some people, that's one of the things what I love about women's circles, because it comes together because I feel like there's two ways to get the thoughts out of your head. It's either write them down or speak them aloud. But to speak them aloud is really scary if you don't feel you're in a safe space. And so that's why I value the women's circle, because you're sharing those thoughts, because sometimes I feel like writing, sometimes I don't. So but speaking them aloud to another person does help remove them from your head. So those are the two things. But if we're not taking time to stop the thoughts, then we don't allow for the intuition to come forth. And the only really way to do that is to really figure out what works for you. It could be dance, it could be movement, it could be something, but you have to explore it to figure out how you can call it forth. So it's really an exploration in figuring that out. But to start with some of the normal ones like meditation or journaling, but even just sitting still for yourself without anything for 5 minutes to see, what does your body feel like doing? Do I feel like writing some things down? Do I feel like listening to a guided meditation, or do I feel like just closing my eyes and repeating a mantra? Or are affirmations my thing? But it really is, it's an exploration for yourself to come into, how can I listen to my inner self? And just asking that question, putting it out and seeing what comes to you for being curious.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of meditation, which can be movement. It can be time outdoors, it can be walking a labyrinth. There are lots of ways to find that entree into a quiet space. And I think there's so many valuable aspects to it, but one item of real value is when you quiet your mind enough, you can start to observe your thoughts. And that's a game changer because now you're conscious. You can
Yeah.
make a conscious decision. Where did this thought come from? Is this what I want? And often digging out where did this thought come from means really just peeling back those layers that society has forced upon us, you know, to be the perfect wife, to be the perfect mother, to have the house, the car, whatever
Yeah.
linear path you were following. Um, you know, I think you hit a point where it's time to peel that stuff back and find out who you really are and live the rest of your life accordingly. And that could be 2 or 3 or 4 or however many different paths that you decide to take over several decades.
I love how you said that about meditation too. And I think a lot of people are scared because they're like, well, oh, my thoughts will never stop. And honestly, your thoughts won't stop. That's how it is. But it's how you put it. It's about being the observer of your thoughts in meditation. And when they do come in, what do you do? You release it? What do you decide to do with that thought? And I think people are like, oh, well, I don't get complete silence. Thoughts keep coming in my head. That isn't the point of meditation. The point of meditation is to figure out what to do with those thoughts.
Well, and I think too, I know for me, meditation gives me an enormous sense of peace and really joy often. I mean, it depends, you know, meditation
Yeah.
varies day to day, but it's experiential in that regard. So you start taking that peace or joy with you wherever you go. That is game changing. You know, you're no longer nee, 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 nee. You're all of a sudden you're just like, oh wow, it's kind of a cool world, isn't it?
Well, and I think that what it comes down to is the idea of actually slowing down.
Very much.
And we're so fast paced, we don't think that we can. But when we actually start to slow down through meditation, through whatever you decide, journaling, whatever you decide to do, it actually does allow you to go faster. I love to say, because you can write the same email in 15 minutes or you can write in 2 hours. Same task needs to be done. But when you're in your zone, that one email that would have taken you 2 hours only takes you 15 minutes. And
Yeah.
so the slowdown process allows for that to happen. And it's hard for us to even say, oh, take that 5-minute break, go walk outside for a little bit. And I struggle sometimes on days like, oh, next meeting, right? But I do feel a difference when you do those things and the stress levels and the things that are going through your body, which keep piling up on each other. And so it is really about the idea of learning to slow down, to go faster. Like I said, I took January off to really hone in on what am I doing? What is my messaging? And when we don't take that time, now I feel like I can move forward and go faster with these ideas, and the new podcast format and all of that, because I have a direction.
Well,
And
you go faster too because you've let go of the peripheral stuff that doesn't matter. You have, exactly as you're saying, you have direction.
I think I didn't share this story, but part of it with me being an entrepreneur, and I like to call us the in-betweenpreneurs who haven't quite made it to wherever we think we want to go, or maybe it's monetary, maybe it's number of followers, whatever it is in your mind as an entrepreneur. But I was so stuck on writing a blog for so long, and I had written a blog on one site. I moved it over to WordPress, and I even hired an SEO expert to help me, and had this format of 50 blogs in 3 months to like get Google SEO and really get out there. And I like to give myself deadlines as an entrepreneur because you get stuck in what do you do? So I'd given myself this deadline of November 12th, 2023 to get this blog up and running. And I was having a launch party. Well, my birthday is October 25th, and I hadn't talked to the SEO expert in a while. And I get on the phone with him, and he's in Australia. So it's like 5:30 in the morning, my time, on my birthday. And all of a sudden I was like, I just need a couple questions answered from it, and then I'll be off. And you know, when you tell yourself that, and then all of a sudden you're like, in the conversation, like, yeah, none of that's going to help me at all. What do I do now? And then we hang up, and like tears are just streaming down my face. All of a sudden I'm like, this isn't going to work. Like, I can't do this blog. And what I had been doing, again, when we have those moments, sometimes looking back at hindsight, I had done 10 interviews. Like, I had the video recordings of them, had done all of that. I was like, why am I hiding this? Why am I trying to take these transcripts, run them through ChatGPT to make this long blog in this format that he wants, that he's saying will reach all the SEO gods and get out to the moms, right? And all of a sudden I was like, why is this not a podcast? And so in 2.5 weeks, from the 25th to the 12th, I turned the idea of a blog into 10 episodes that were released, had a blog party. We had a circle during the party, and like March 20, I think it was March 24th. I didn't even realize it. So 4 months later, I had 50 episodes released. And I didn't even realize like the number or anything. All of a sudden I was like, there's the 50. And like when you put these visions into place, you don't even realize it. And when it goes to what you're doing, things start to shift, and you realize when it's your genius, how like it wasn't as hard. Like it was January that I hired him, and it's now November, and I hadn't even written one decent blog in 7 months.
Well, and I think it really brings up the importance of just going for it. You try it. Maybe this
Yeah.
works, maybe it morphs into something else, but you put yourself out there, you get out of your comfort zone, which is very uncomfortable for most people. And but that's where creativity lies, outside your comfort zone.
It's so true, because that's so true. And as moms, I want to point this out, is we let the busyness determine our comfort zone, because we kind of hide behind it. Like, I'm too busy to think about what would put me out of my comfort zone. What is it that I actually want to do? I'm like, oh, I got to take care of the kids. I got to do all this. Like, I don't have time for any of that. You got some time. You got 15 minutes a day. And that's where I call it mom time, because you do have 15 minutes a day. I know you don't have an hour. I know you don't have all of this, but you do have 15 minutes to start thinking about you and to start releasing the busyness. Because once you release it, then you realize you have a lot more time in the day to do the things that you want to do. And you start changing. And the more you start doing the things that you desire, that you want to do, the relationships with the people in your life start to change too. And I will admit, some people you might, with you start making these changes, that you might realize they weren't the right people for you. But at the same time, with your kids or people that you really do want to strengthen, you start having stronger, more genuine relationships with them, and you start being more honest. And so it is that give and take, which is why I even want to create this community, because I feel once you start going after your desires and your genius and the things that you want, you do start losing some of those mom friends you thought were your friends, or some of that, because you're just on the same wavelength as long, which is not good nor bad. And they might get there or what, but it just, you find the right people for you in your time of life right now. And so that's why I even wanted to create this community, was because I want all of these ideas of your flames to grow. And when they're grown high enough that you're ready to share them, that's when you bring them into the world, not before that. Not you need somewhere to percolate all of this stuff so they don't die.
I think everybody needs a space to percolate.
Yeah.
Society has really, on the one hand, we're much more connected. On the other hand, we're much less connected. That in-person connection is getting rarer and rarer unless you really consciously go after it. And I think that any creative idea really benefits from some other voices. People bring other ideas, people bring other energy, people who may have a really good point about where you're going or what you're doing. You can't see your whole idea or your business or your baby clearly. You really can't.
You can't. And that's why coaches need coaches. Like, you think, oh, well, I should be able to do that for myself. You can't.
Yeah,
You're in your own head. Like, you need the outside perspective. Like, what I can do for someone else, I cannot do for myself.
very
And
true.
I think vice versa of everyone. And that's why we all need that observer on the outside of whatever we're working on, or need that. But we need that perspective, especially women, because we're designed to have those conversations. We're designed at times to overanalyze every little thing. But when we start to really separate our thoughts and stuff, as you're talking about with meditation and things, then it's not this over anxiousness. So I'll even give an example in my own life of, when I did something that upset a friend or something, and you know how like you harbor those feelings over and over in your head,
Yeah.
and it might sit there for like 3 or 4 days, like just beating yourself up over like making them feel better or whatever happened. Right. So for me, it was, I'd actually create my first in-person circle, and it was something I had to do to remove myself from it because of the feelings I was doing. But the backlash of all of that, and beating myself up for having to do, I'm like, this is my business. What's going to happen? What does this all mean? And these were my friends, and all those thoughts. Right. But as I kept going down the journey, as I made, I don't necessarily call them similar mistakes, but as you make other mistakes, as you call people out or do something, those thoughts don't last as long. You're not in that anxiety of what did I do? What did I do? You try your best to rectify or talk about that mistake, or you realize it's time to just move on. Whereas when we're in that anxiety of always comparing and feeling like we need to to be perfect and people pleasing. The biggest thing I think for women is people pleasing, because that was me. I was the biggest people pleaser. And so you are not truly yourself when you're people pleasing. And then you live in resentment because you expect people to think that's not what I wanted. They should have known. But they don't know unless you express it.
And the thing with people pleasing is you become a slightly different person with each person you want to please. So you're pleasing your boss, you're pleasing your kids, you're pleasing your spouse, you're pleasing the lady in the flower store, or whatever it is. That creates a really fractured existence, and you don't even know you're doing this. And it's not until you stop doing that, or you do it more consciously or selectively, that you start to come together and become more cohesive.
Oh, it's so true. But that was the anxiety of that would last for 3 or 4 days, was that idea of like, oh my God, I messed up so bad. I was, but that was a people pleasing nature.
Yeah.
Until we decide like, okay, well, that happened. I put an apology, or I did this, and it was either accepted or not, but then it's time to, you're not sitting in it as long because you realize that it's not that important.
And you're learning forgiveness and letting go too.
Yeah, exactly. Because forgiveness is key, and forgiveness isn't necessary for the other person.
No, it's for you.
For you to release it and to move on and not be in that broken record in your head of beating yourself up, because that's where all our time and energy goes, is that broken record in our head.
Well, and that broken record sets neural pathways, so it stays.
Exactly.
And yeah, you want to interrupt that process real fast if you can.
And so that is really the key, I think, to everything that we've been talking about as a meditation, is disrupting that broken record. And it's a conscious choice. Some people feel like they can't, like they're scared to release that. And that's a big fear too. And it's just, they're so used to doing those things. And that's the way it is, right? You always hear that. That's the way I've always been doing it. Well, how's that been working for you?
It is hard to make significant life changes, particularly if you don't have a traumatic event that forces you to do it. And you're doing it because you know down deep you want to make some changes. That is a really difficult thing to do. It doesn't have to be difficult. We make it difficult, I think, on ourselves. But it takes courage to step out and decide that you're going to live a little bit differently.
It does. It takes tremendous courage. And courage, I look at it as like, a lot of people think courage is like lack of fear, but it's seeing the fear and just walking into it or walking past it. And I was on a call, I was on a circle the other day, and she was like, take the fear and put it in your pocket. Like, it's still with you, but you can move forward instead of just being paralyzed by it. And a lot of times that's what fear will do to us, is paralyze us. And it's not going to go away. It's there. It's part of our nature to protect us. And at times we do need fear. I mean, it warns us at night if something's bad happening, it's needed, but it's you to decide how much it's needed at that moment. Is it you just getting out of your comfort zone that's causing the fear, or is there a real actual danger in sight? And so you need to make those choices. And so you can even just use that visualization of, nope, I'm just going to put down here in my pocket because I know that I just need to walk past my comfort zone. And
yeah, no, you're so right. And Martha McSally, I think it was, said, do things afraid. And she said, courage is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Well, I can even think of like the first podcast I did, and like now it's like, okay, let's go. And so it really is that getting on the comfort zone. But now what's your next zone that you have to get out of? Because we always have to keep raising the temperature to really be that person that we see. And especially for moms, I like to say, one of the things I would always say is that you can kind of picture it like, is if when you're doing a task like laundry, or for me, it was doing dishes. Like if you're just you're doing the dishes and all of a sudden you're just like, is there more than just this? Like, what is that more? And that's when you're being called to something outside. As you were saying, it might not be a traumatic event. It might just be something reoccurring. And it's going to be reoccurring probably until there is a traumatic event. I think it was over to put that to like throw the brick on. It'll keep happening. But if you're listening to this and you're aware that you're just feeling like there's something that needs to come out, and that's where I really think the creativity, the genius inside of you is ready. You're ready to be awakened, and you're ready to.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, but you're so right. And I think one of the things at that point you bring to the table that is so important is a community of people, some of whom can be it's okay to be a little lost. But the more you connect with others, the more found you may become.
And the more you realize what it is that what is that you want, your calling. I mean, it could be just organizing events for your kid. I mean, it doesn't have to be something big, but it has to be something that feels meaningful and impactful to you, because we are meant to serve in some capacity, that we want to leave some sort of legacy. It's in us to leave something behind. But the question is what? And that's where your genius comes into play. And a lot of times we just do things because we've always done it that way. But your soul was called to do something in this world and to leave some sort of mark. And then that's what's being awakened in you, going, is this really it? Even my 11-year-old yesterday was just like, I don't want to go to school. It's just the same thing every day. It's just gonna be like this till the end of high school. But it's that feeling, right, that we have inside of us, that when we do the same thing over and over and over, and this is just it. So how do we disrupt that? How do we change that? And that's a question for you to ask yourself. What is it that I want? What is it that I desire? And that's not always an easy question when we put it off for, if we're in our 40s or 50s and we put off for the last 25 years or whatever, and we haven't thought about ourselves since college or whenever, when we got married and started taking on all these other roles. And we even thought about, what is it that I want to do? What is it that I want to leave in this world? And I think just though sitting with those questions, sitting in the silence of it and just getting to know, and it's about just being open to it. And again, it's just the same thing. You activate your reticular activating system, which is your RAS, just like when you get a new car, because it's always the one that everyone knows. You see the car everywhere. Well, now when you start asking these potent questions to yourself, you might not get the answers like, in 10 seconds, but in the next couple of weeks, months, as you start opening your subconscious to those ideas, things start coming in. It might be images, it might be advertisement or something that catches your eye. If you really ask, did I put that into play? Is that answering the question that I put out there? Is my curiosity now open? And as you start to take notes of those are the things you start to take notes of. And then when you have like a full sheet, you go, what is my next step? By looking over these things that when you're ready, the teacher will appear.